Chapter 5. Dad felt exhausted when he and Betsy returned to the cafe, but Betsy had as much energy as a jumping bee. She ran straight down to the sea. Mum had given her a shell that she could whisper into any time she needed her. Betsy put the shell to her lips and waited. It always seemed to Betsy that Mum was never far away. For no sooner had she blown into the shell than there she was. Betsy couldn't wait to tell her about the toad. She was jammed full of questions. Where was Tiger? Where was Mr. Tiger? Who did the ship festooned in flags belong to? And the crown of all questions, when is a moon ever blue? Unfortunately, said Mum, a blue moon happens sometime never. So that means, said Betsy, gong-along berry ice cream is impossible to make. Unless, said Betsy's mum, you believe in magic. Mermaids, Betsy thought, always were a little watery when it came to answering questions. Off she went to the harbour master, who had a bushy beard, and asked if he had seen anyone on board the ship. The harbour master said he hadn't, for if he had seen Mr. Tiger, he would know. Mr. Tiger was quite unforgettable. Betsy asked the lady in the flower shop, who didn't have a beard. She said she remembered seeing a ship like that in a glass bottle, bobbing up and down on cardboard waves. The baker and the candlestick maker were both sure they had seen that ship when they were children, but the butcher thought it was a load of rubbish. He didn't believe anyone had ever seen Mr. Tiger. He belongs to fairy stories, said the butcher. It was, thought Betsy, as she had walked home, a mystery. After tea that evening, Dad found a guidebook to Gong-along Island. In it was a recipe for Gong-along ice cream. The pages had turned yellow. Betsy loved the smell of old books. This one smelled of an island as far away as Sunday. In the middle of the book was a fold-out map. It showed where the gong-along berries grew, but said they could only be harvested under a blue moon, which happened sometime never. The X on the map marked the spot where the berries could be found. She turned the page and there was a more detailed drawing of a mountain. Underneath was written, "The Mountain of Perpetual Mist." What does perpetual mean? Asked Betsy. It means mist that never goes away. It is there forever and ever, replied Dad. Crumble cakes, said Betsy as she continued to look through the book. The guidebook said that the island was the home of the Gong-along people, who are even smaller than a quarter of the size of your average human being. They are as delicate as china cups and as strong as cement. Known far and wide for their amazing acrobatic skills. But it says nothing about the two princesses, not a word, said Betsy. It is an old guidebook, said Dad. It might very well be out of date. What? I don't understand, said Betsy, is how the toad came here from an island as far away as Sunday. Neither do I, said Dad. Also, I don't understand who those glinting eyes belong to, said Betsy. What eyes? Said Dad. The ones I saw in the cave behind the toad, said Betsy. Very odd indeed, said Dad. That night, the lights on the blue and white striped ship lit up, yet no one could be seen on board. Not until... Chapter 6. The following morning, when Betsy looked out of her bedroom window, there in the distance she could see the top of a circus tent. She washed and dressed as fast as you could say frantic frogs fizzle on Fridays. She brushed her teeth before sliding down the banisters of the tall, windy house. Betsy landed, as she always did, in a heap at the foot of the stairs. Picking herself up, she ran to find Dad, calling out all the while, "The circus has come to town! The circus has come to town!" Dad was carrying a tray of breakfast things. "Please let's go and see if Mr. Tiger is there," said Betsy. "Why don't we eat first?" said Dad, handing Betsy a basket of freshly baked rolls. "Do I have to?" she said as she followed him into the cafe. She was surprised to see, sitting in the corner, a gentleman reading a newspaper. That's odd, thought Betsy, because the cafe was not open yet. But stranger still, she caught a glimpse of an orange and brown striped tail beneath the table. She looked again. Those were not hands holding the newspaper. They were orange and brown striped paws. "Dad," said Betsy as Mr. Glory put the tray down in front of the gentleman. "Dad," whispered Betsy. "Mr. Tiger." "Did someone say my name?" came a purring voice from behind the newspaper. Betsy could feel her legs go wobbly. There, seated in front of her, was none other than Mr. Tiger himself. He wore a smart top hat, through which 2 furry ears stuck out, a bow tie and a tiger skin coat, which was all his own. He stood up and towered over Dad and Betsy. Putting out a paw, he said, "You must be Betsy K. Glory. A pleasure to meet you. Would you join me for breakfast?" Betsy sat down, and for the first time she could think of nothing to say. "Alfonso was telling me you talked to the toad yesterday," purred Mr. Tiger. Betsy nodded. She had never imagined that Dad actually knew him. Finally, she found her tongue. How long have you known my dad?" she asked. "Now, let me think," said Mr. Tiger. He took out a pocket watch, which had no numbers on it, just pictures. He studied it before he said, "Alfonso was about your age, 8 years old. And then, of course, I was here when he opened his cafe. Not to mention being at his wedding to your mum, Myrtle. A very wonderful day that was." "You know Mum too?" said Betsy. "Yes, of course. I came here to celebrate your birth." "Why did you never tell me, Dad?" But Mr. Tiger had other questions on his mind. "So, what did the toad tell you?" Betsy told Mr. Tiger that the toad was really a princess and that her sister, Princess Olaf, had put a spell on her. Mr. Tiger let out a sigh that sounded more like a growl. "We need to find a way to break the spell if the toad is to be saved," he said. "What I want to know," said Dad, "is how the toad, princess, travelled here in the first place." "Simple. A cave," said Mr. Tiger. "It goes down beneath the sea. It twists and it turns before it comes up on the side of the mountain of perpetual mist." "Then we are not a proper island," said Betsy. "Very few islands are," said Mr. Tiger. "But the tunnel is no use to us. Only teeny tiny people can use it. If we want to go to Gonganong Island, we will have to go by ship." "Ship?" said Betsy. "The blue and white one in the harbour. Is it yours? Are we going with you?" she asked, jumping up and down. "Well, I do hope so, as long as your mum agrees to come too," said Mr. Tiger. Sometimes happiness is a red balloon, thought Betsy, round and big enough to lift you off your feet.